Hi guys, we're coming to you again because he didn't put his microphone on for the whole stuff we just recorded, so we've had a good rehearsal. Hello everyone, welcome back to Autosport, welcome back to Suzuka, a really windy Suzuka. It has a lot of issues today because of the wind. So before we get onto the running, before we get onto some of the red flags, Jake, explain to us from a technical perspective, when the wind's like this, what it can do to the cars. What does it do? It disrupts them essentially, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because all of these cars are designed to run in relatively laminar or clean flow. It's so difficult to predict turbulence with any kind of CFD modelling or wind tunnel modelling or anything like that. When you get gusting winds, when you get crosswinds, anything like that, the cars aren't really designed to work in those conditions. It's going to disrupt how the front wing works, it's going to disrupt the floor and the rear wing, all of the major components there just not working optimally, and so it can catch drivers out. I think we saw it as early as FP1, drivers having snaps off the road, just not being able to predict what the car's going to do. So that's the effect of wind, and again, that's why we saw so many mistakes, I think, today.
Let's go over FP1. I went out trackside for that, really good fun. Got down to Degner, got down to the S's, which is one of the best views in Formula One down there, watching those cars come through there. Lando Norris, top of the timesheets, but didn't have it all his own way, did he?
No, it took a few goes for him to get there because, as I said, wind precipitated some mistakes. And just over there at the Casio Triangle, one time nearly had a spin, another time nearly went off the road. Well, did go off the road, he went into the gravel actually. On the third try, he eventually set a time that was good enough for the top of the timesheets. He did take it very easy in that final corner. His sector time was not his best one, but his sectors 1 and 2 were blistering, so that's why he was top in FP1.
But different for Piastri.
Yeah, only P15, and I think it was his first sector that was the main issue. And again, because you're going through so many changes of direction, because the wind's going to try and push you off or push you wide or whatever. So yeah, he just didn't get that lap in. McLaren did look a little bit of a handful, so yeah, that's why he didn't get right where he should have been.
We talk a lot about how these times in FP1, FP2 are not necessarily indicative of what we see over the rest of the weekend. I think the wind will only add to that today, but Yuki Tsunoda, quite impressive on his Red Bull debut. Does that matter? It will matter to him, won't it, I think?
Yeah, definitely, and it was a sort of suspicion that Red Bull maybe took a little bit of fuel out of his car for FP1 or turned the engine mode a little bit up, just to kind of give him that confidence, make him relatively comfortable in the car. But actually, if you look at the lap as a whole, he just wasn't far off Verstappen generally. He was a little bit quicker in the straights, not as quick in the corners, but wasn't by much. So it's a good thing to build from. We'll talk about FP2 in a minute. He didn't get much of a chance to really go flat out or try a race simulation as such, but I think it's an encouraging start. I think he was closer than Lawson ever was in one session. Reason to be cheerful, I think.
You mentioned FP2 there, let's switch on to that when you were trackside. And again, Yuki Tsunoda, one of a few drivers, didn't set a time on the soft tyres because we had 4 red flags. So let's tick them off in order first. The first one, just over here, Jack Doohan, turn 1, big accident. You got a photo of the wreckage as it was coming back. As you said, I think you said at the time, it's not going to buff out, is it? But that could have been caused by the wind, potentially?
It's possible, because he was going into turn 1, taking a little bit of braking, as you do. You're not really braking for turn 1, you brake for turn 2. And so you're going through a little bit of a compression and you're going through a curve as well. And I think there's a bump down there as well. You can see the sort of skid block marks around the kind of outside the corner. Maybe you just hit that and went straight into the wall. Either way, heavy damage, and I think probably $1 million or $2 million in repairs. Not 100% sure on the total figure, but yeah.
It'd be even more galling for him because he wasn't even out there in FP1, obviously, because Hirakawa swapped in for that session. So I think he did 4 laps, which around here, it's not a lot, is it? Especially for a rookie like Doohan. The second red flag, bit of nothingness really with Fernando going off into the gravel. Then we come on to those last 2 later in the session, both for basically track fires, if you like, wasn't it? Scorched grass that was just catching alight. The first one, a little small patch that just happened to go and catch. They put that out, get the cars back out for 7 minutes. There was only 7 minutes left at that stage. And again, right at the end, a one that seemed to spread like, it felt a bit like spreading like wildfire, if you want to use that. Hopefully that's a good way of putting it. But Is there a challenge there tomorrow? Should they get out and water it? I don't know. It's a weird one to suggest. How do they fix that problem, really?
It's a weird situation. It's like, what do you do? And teams are already super limited on track time in FP2, so watching 2 red flags because of grass fires, it's just adds insult to injury, doesn't it?
And I think if you've seen the second one, again, to keep harping on about the wind, it clearly is the wind that takes that, and it moves so quickly. And actually, I was ready to start packing up my stuff in the media centre and getting out of here, but let's go to the actual timings. I suppose, do they mean anything?
I mean, probably not, because not everybody got to do a fast lap. And in FP2, generally, you sort of want to do a couple of installs, maybe on the medium tyre, then you switch to softs, pop a few qualifying adjacent laps in, not quite at full power, but throw a few laps in, and then you go on to the long runs, take the medium tyre to, about 10 to 12 laps, get a feeling of the fuel loads, get a feeling of how the tyre's degrading. Fair bit of graining in FP1 as well that teams were finding, so whether they could dial that out with setup changes, anything like that. But that will be all moved to Saturday morning. But I don't know what your other impressions of FP2 were in the limited running.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? But I think someone who would be delighted is Isack Hadjar. There's been nothing really said about him this weekend. This guy goes and puts it behind the 2 McLarens. Now, whether you say that those times are indicative or not, for him to be the lead of the 4 Red Bull drivers, he'll be in that motorhome tonight smiling, won't he?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think he's been super impressive since he's come in. I'll be honest, my expectations were pretty low going into the season. He had a decent F2 campaign last year and was definitely in the title fight, but he made way too many mistakes. And I kind of thought, well, coming out of the blocks, that will be the same case again. Yeah, sure, Australia, but that's notwithstanding because it was so difficult conditions. China, he was super impressive, just taken away by strategy. So he's got a really good chance this weekend. The racing balls just look super nice to handle. And for a rookie, that's ideal.
Quicker than Lawson in both sessions, but I think you would say, given that Lawson's now had to swap back into another car that he's not that 100% used to, it would have been expected, I suppose?
I think so, yeah. I mean, he's had a bit of a bruising experience, so I think going back into a car that he's sort of semi-familiar with, that's going to take a little bit of work. It's just rebuilding confidence, isn't it? I mean, he seemed bullish on Thursday in the press conference, but there's that, and then there's actually getting behind the car and whether you're afraid of it or not, that's the thing.
It's worth saying the V10 summit that we're going to see in Bahrain, Autosport understands that the teams are getting together with the FIA to have a conversation essentially around the desire to potentially bring back V10s. That won't happen next year. I think we know that, don't we, given how far down the road the teams are with the engines for the new regulations. But there seems to be a moving needle, if you like, that it might not have to wait till 2031. It might happen during that new regulation set. When the FIA president first mentioned it and it felt a bit a bit of an out there thing. It seems quite weird that it's progressed so quickly and we might end up having them sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I know. I kind of thought, be a little bit of a dead cat. Obviously, there's an election later this year. It sort of seemed like a little bit of a political play, but actually there are teams that are keen on it, and clearly, you could probably say that there are maybe some teams that are lobbying to go in that direction. But equally, there are manufacturers that aren't.
Yeah, Audi, of course, are coming into it next year purely because they're the electrification of F1, if you like. But I think part of that, we touch on that word electrification, as one of the driving factors behind why we might see a move to those V10s. The fact that the EV market in consumer cars and road cars is essentially smaller and it's actually shrinking rather than expanding, as was expected when the regulations were first announced. That's going to play a big part. And F1's always been, one of the prime things for F1 has always been to essentially what you see on a road car in a few years what you see here. They've moved away from that recently. There's going to be a shift back towards that, I think, if this V10 idea is rolled out. And also the cost. It costs teams a lot less to do that. There'll be less, I suppose, specialists required. So it is one that is worth keeping an eye on, especially in Bahrain, we think, on Friday. Interesting story from our colleague Erwin at Motorsport as well today, who essentially discovered, hidden in some FIA files, that they've released a new map to the teams for this weekend onwards, which essentially a safety car map, which says, look, we've had far too many safety cars that were unnecessary. We think there's a way we can, cut them out. And they've basically published a map that says these are the areas we'd like you to stop if possible. Jack Doohan today didn't really have a choice. But it's things like that just, it might sound boring, but it just increases the chance that we're going to go racing and not see red flags and stuff. So it can only be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Anything to kind of just expedite the process and making the races a little bit, there's a lack of efficiency, let's say, and I think there's so many things that you could just so easily fix, and it kind of is low-hanging fruit. Obviously, we like a safety car every now and again, but when they're having to come out every moment because someone's parked up in the wrong spot and that could be easily avoided, then yeah, it makes sense to change it.
That's a good place to wave the red flag for this video, I think. And catch us tomorrow where we'll have FP3, we'll have qualifying. Hopefully we'll have less wind, but join us then. Thank you.